Welcome to Dial M for Films. Writer, director, producer, entrepreneur, founding member of Women in Cinema Collective, also known as WCC, Anjali Menon grew up in Dubai in a business family. Her father, Mr. T.M. Nair, moved to UAE in 1959, one of the early Indians there, and steadfastly created a legacy of automobiles that is remembered even today. Despite the distance, her parents kept her and her elder brothers connected with their culture. They spoke Malayalam at home, celebrated all festivals with fierce authenticity, and business was more about creating opportunity, community, and giving back than about money. Anjali trained in Bharatanatyam for 14 years, and her natural pull towards stories and the stage blossomed in a house that kept the muscle for the arts flexed at all times. She did her master's in communication studies from the University of Pune in 1997 and master's in art and technique of filmmaking from the London International Film School in 2002. This is where she made her first short film, Black Nor White. The executive producer on the film was Asif Kapadia. The film screened on graduation night to rousing applause. It was also selected for the Palm Springs International Film Festival. Anjali moved back to India in 2003. She completed her first feature, Manjari Kuru, in December 2007, but the film was released only 5 years later in 2012. By then, her first short, Happy Journey, as part of an anthology called Kerala Cafe, had already come out. She met dream collaborator Anwar Rashid during Kerala Cafe and started writing Ustad Hotel for him. Work of Fate, Ustad Hotel and Manjari Kuru released within a month of each other in 2012, and the world woke up to Anjali Menon. She won several awards for both films. Bangalore Days followed in 2014. It became Anjali's breakout film, and in the years that followed has acquired cult status. I can go on and on because Anjali's list of accomplishments is endless. And what she brings to the table cannot be articulated in a way that does full justice to her talent. But in the interest of time, we do want her to make her next film. It is time to pull her in. Anjali Menon, welcome to Dial M for Films.
Thank you, Smriti. Thank you.
Have I embarrassed you? have I kept...
Thoroughly and exhaustively, yes, I must say that.
Have I at least accomplished that? But Anjali, listen, I know you don't do this often. I know that you're a very private person. So thank you so much for making the time to share your process, your methodology, your craft, and its evolution over the years with us.
Pleasure. For the very little that I have exercised of it.
Anjali, I want to begin with your first film. I know that you had already started, thinking about writing, working on Manjari Kuru, even before you came back to India. And you were very sure about the fact that you wanted to tell the story in Malayalam. The film was a journey for you both as an artist and as a person. You're a reverse migrant. It was an exploration into a culture that you experienced in a distant land, an attempt to read and write in a language that you spoke, and also to find your feet as an artist. So there were too many things happening at one time. I just want to understand that how did this journey begin? And when it began, and you came back in 2003, what were those 4 very eventful years like?
Well, I think any film student worth their salt will have a feature script in their head, and I was one of them. And I think I started writing Manjari Kuru when I was at film school, and just hammering away, trying to do things. The whole feature format sort of is very daunting when you've worked mainly in shorts, and then at that stage it was just something I loved doing, trying to put together those characters, trying to create that sort of world, which I was familiar with and I missed possibly. And like you said, as part of that phase, I had also made a choice to come back to India, and I chose to live here. The rest of my family does not. And it's just somehow I've always wanted to. And it sort of gave me the opportunity for me to really look at my cultural bearings and learn so much about Manjari Kuru. Like the content of the film, the whole experience of it was very much homecoming. And to be able to engage with my own language in a way that I hadn't done before, all of that was was very scary, but very, very inviting as well, I have to say. So yes, as soon as I came back, I had sort of a whole flurry of developments in my personal life, and I met my husband to be. We got engaged. I lost my father. I got married. I moved cities. All of that happened over the span of about a year. And I'd really not taken the time for myself to process much of it. And I just very quickly sort of slipped into a shell for about 3 years from there. And it took me a while to get out. And during that time, I just wrote. That's all I did. And not just Manjari Crew, I wrote multiple things. And at one stage, I actually showed this particular script to a very well-known, well-respected writer. And he said, don't make this as your first film. So I was quite heartbroken, to be frank. And then I said, well, he should know what he's talking about. So I put it away and I started working on other stuff. And I would keep going back to this one every time I felt down, and it became like my go-to solution for anything else that I was doing. And now I wasn't writing for anyone to read; I was just writing for myself, and I think that in itself kind of changed the process. After that, I was very wary of showing it to anybody in the industry, because what if they said the same thing? And I really wanted to make this one as my first film. So I wanted to at the same time get advice about narrative, about as a narrative structure, whether it worked, and whether it worked in Malayalam, the language itself. And so, if not the industry, then where do I go? So I reached out to this wonderful person, great teacher called Kavalam Narayana Panikir. Panikir sir is a theatre guru. He is, he's so well known. He's been the vice chairman at the Sangeet Natak Academy. He's got a Padma Bhushan, revered in many, many spheres. But more than anything, revered for his complete dedication to our language and our arts. And for him to even touch my script, for me, that was a dream. So I tried to reach him, and he was so forthcoming with his advice and so generous with his time that he just literally kind of invited me into his home and into his work and said, come over. And I sort of took the opportunity to document some of his work. So we traveled with his troupe, and a lot of things happened. He wrote lyrics for my film, songs, and all of this gave me an opportunity to see his directorial process. He's a theatre director, a writer, a poet, a lyricist, a musicologist, a whole lot of things. And it really gave me a very up close and personal exposure to what I thought was very distant. And it was through him that I sort of realized that there were actually many latent things that I had never counted as strengths. And he really infused that kind of courage to say, go back, do your thing, you know what you need, don't worry. Don't be so nervous, you don't have to take everybody else's opinion. If you know what you want to do, just go and do it. And I think that is what powered my journey to make that film.
What you said was very interesting. I didn't have this as on my roster of questions, but I'm compelled to ask because when you're a first-time director embarking on this journey and you've written something that you would like should be your voice out there, your first step out there, and you show it to somebody and that person tells you, somebody very respected, and that person tells you that maybe you should not make this film, and then you quickly keep it away and start working on other things. What does it do to you? What happened? How did you process that?
See, I don't believe in this whole thing of, this sort of mystical writer that you are and you're so away from everything real. It's a very real thing. I want to make a film. I thought this was going to be my first film, and someone says, this may not be a good idea. And then I say, oh, okay, well, he knows better. So I put it aside. There is, of course, the heartbreak of characters you've nursed and, images you have in your mind. And, if not now, when will I get to do that? And if it's not this, do I have something else that compares? All of these questions come to you. And I said, let me put that away. I cannot just continue to be in love with them. So I just put it away. And I wrote some other stuff, which, again, I found very engaging. But somehow, you kind of gravitate towards themes, towards the material that you relate to. And I think this choice of what is the subject of your first film? It is something that I discuss very often when I'm teaching, because a lot of people, when they're setting out to make that first film, you really need to ask the question, why are you making it? And first and foremost, for who are you making it? Because how invested are you? How much of yourself is invested in that film? And how long have you actually been working for it? It may not be just you may be working all your life to gearing towards that one film. So that kind of self-questioning is very important, I think, and that really helps orient oneself. And at one stage, when one has the conviction, what he was actually questioning was, the gentleman is someone I respect so much, and if he questions and I put it aside, that speaks of my conviction or the lack of it. So if I had the conviction, I would never have put it aside. So it took me time to find the conviction and say, no, I think this is what I'm going to do. So to be able to commit to that, despite advice that one gets, that I think is a growth in itself. So very often when you're mentoring people and when you're with their first film drafts and things, and I'd rather I put the script aside and say, why are you doing this? What is it about this character? Why sometimes you find very little of the people and their world experiences there in the films. And then I would like to encourage people to build bridges, bring themselves into the film. And I think that endows it with a richer spirit.
Anjali, you were moving back to India. You were coming here. You wanted to tell the story in a language that you spoke but didn't read or write in. You were entering a completely different ecosystem. I know that Manjari Kuru, you stopped shooting for that. I mean, you finished shooting for it, I think, on the 1st of December 2007. That was when it all came together. But in those 4 years, from raising finance to kind of pulling a crew together, from starting your company, what are the first steps that you did to even enter the system, so to speak, because the country was also new to you, the city was new to you, everything was new to you.
It was, and I tried to reach out to people I knew within the industry, and it was a strange time. I have sat outside producers' offices waiting. I have sent my scripts and waited for months on end to just be told, "Oh, really? You sent it? Oh, okay. Could you send it again?" And all of that. I've written to filmmakers requesting to assist them, and it didn't work. It did not work. They were very well-meaning producers who would come back and say, "Well, here, good script. It's not the time for this now." Or and this was not even just Manjari Kuru, mind you. There were different scripts that I had created, and I realized that there is really no way to break in. It's really tough, and I wasn't in a space where I was looking to assist. I initially did, but then I realized that this is really tough. It isn't so easy to sort of just break in, and at that point we didn't have any kind of a system. There was no social media. It was just a really difficult time. And I said, see, why am I actually waiting? I have done a fair amount of assisting abroad, and I have gained a certain amount of experience. I have the confidence that, if all of these things come together, some kind of a basic, decent narrative I might be able to put together. And then the rest of it is a leap of faith. So if I surround myself with the right collaborators, then that would possibly, help me. So I started to find those people. So it was just a very basic task of first finding that one person. You know how they say about, the first follower is actually the one who transforms a mad nut into a leader. I found that first follower in someone who came to me and said, can I assist you? And because he knew I was working on something, can I just, learn with you? And I said, great, come on board, you and me, we're a team. And the two of us, we just got going. This was a young man, Arvind Ashok Kumar. He was as green as I was. And we sat across a table, him on the other side and me on this side, and we started our work. And we went around looking for locations, finding the thing. I started thinking of actors and all of that. All of this after the script is done. And I took about a year to do all of that, and I'd found a lot of my places. I'd started finding people I wanted to work with, and then it was about finding the money to put it together. So there was a certain amount of funds that I had secured. But then I wrote in, like a lot of people, I Googled and I found that NFDC was giving out a co-production deal. And it was the first of its kind at that time. And I applied for it. And I think they had some 100 projects, and ours was the only one which got selected. And so that was a big thing. That was the first big vote of confidence that someone thought, other than the two of us, someone thought that this was okay.
This was a good idea.
Yeah, so that was quite hard. I remember getting the notes of the panel which judged it. I mean, they didn't know who wrote it or anything. And the panel had Santosh Shivan, PK Nair, really, really big names. And it felt wonderful that those people had even read my script. That was fabulous. So at that stage, all of that really mattered. And that's how it started off.
Anjali, making a film is tough enough, but you didn't know that the toughest battle that you will fight to get your voice out there would be once the film is done. You were blindsided by certain things that you didn't see coming, almost gobsmacked by what happened. And I know that you finished the film. We spoke about it earlier in 2007, and because of these reasons, you only managed to get your film back in 2012 and released it. What did this unsavory experience teach you? How did you process this and move ahead?
One thing, that conviction that I was speaking of, I think that is the one thing that one has to hold on to. That is what it really taught me. And I realized that I can be quite mulish that way. I would not have thought otherwise, because there are, of course, there are areas in my life where I've had to be very stubborn and say, no, this is what I will do, and I hold on, and that is there. But when something like this, which is so outside, your control, but there are so many variables out there. And the situations we had certain issues which cropped up with our co-production, and eventually I had to buy the film back. I bought the film back and then completed it. And the whole idea was everyone and their brother was telling me to move on. People say that to you, okay, this is one, move on, do another thing. Half the people tell you, okay, see, we told you films are not for you. Half of them said that. The other half would say, move on, do something else. But the very problem was that everybody else had moved on. And if I have also moved on, then there's going to be nobody to take care of that film or those characters, or all that work comes to nothing. And then I have to start from a clean slate where the person sitting opposite me has no idea that I have been through this cycle once. So that was just not acceptable. That was not fair, not to just me, but to everybody who put their heart and soul together for the film. So on their behalf, I really had to just, dig my heels in and stand there and say, no, I will complete this. So I told myself I will not do another feature until I can bring this out. So there were certain opportunities, but I preferred to stick with the work I had already begun. And I remembered my dad, he used to tell me that geniuses finish things. So the most important thing is not just do thing and think that you're a genius, but damn it, finish it. And no matter what it took, I needed to finish that cycle. I'm a little crazy that way. Whatever, if I take up a course, a movie, anything, I have to finish it. That's important. I can't walk away halfway from a movie theater, even if it's a lousy film. I just can't do it. So that streak, I guess, played into this, and it taught me a lot. But I think destiny has certain plans as well, because it was when I was sitting and waiting for things to shape up that the opportunity to do Kerala Cafe came to me. And the reason I sort of was very happy to jump on board was this was not another feature. It was not going to take me away from my career. It was a short. A short film is a format that I was far more comfortable with at that stage. And so I just sort of literally jumped into it very happily. And it was a privilege actually to be working with a lot of other very established filmmakers and to get an opportunity like that. So it was something I really enjoyed. And it was my first taste with the audience, to sit in a theater and hear how they respond. That was very special. And I really, it meant a lot to me because I had really yearned for it, to watch my film in a theater with an audience, and I'd not got that. So it meant so much to be able to get that even in that little way. Soon after we bought it, I found I was pregnant. And we got Manjari Crew back. Within months, I was pregnant, and then, I was advised bed rest, and I wasn't, supposed to be traveling or working or anything. So there again, okay, another year goes by. So it was like that.
There are lots of young filmmakers and people who want to be in the industry on this call and watching this session. What would you advise them to do, because the kind of trouble you got into with Manjari Guru? So what is it? What do you think a young filmmaker, how can they safeguard themselves for a situation like this?
See, I at the end of the day, anything can happen. I don't think there's any safeguards you can sort of permanently employ. I would have done it if I'd known it. But it's that, when you say it's my film, that's because you're taking the responsibility for it. It is not because you have created it just by yourself. You're actually taking on the responsibility on behalf of these 100 people who have worked with you. You're the custodian of it. You're the safekeeper. So for that, you say, okay, we have to hold this safe. And I might, my whole journey, my wait of 4 years may not make sense to anybody else. But it makes sense to me. I can live with it. For me, I think I would only do things that you can live with. I could not have lived with walking away from it. Whereas I know many others who would have just done that the next year, they would have made another project and moved on. And then you wouldn't have to say that, in so many years, you made only these many films. They would have made films every year. So there are people who have that journey, and there's no right and wrong. It's to each their own. They might have seen that time as a waste. They might have seen, it differently from what I did. So I think we should all know what we can live with. Our choices are based on that. But other than that, I would just say, this whole thing, as you come in very green, very naive as a filmmaker. I think you should always have your practical hat on, always consult legally, all of that you really have to put in place. You shouldn't go with the trust that things are like film school, where, people will be good and they will be fine and they will all care about the project as much as you do. No. I think, it's that way, it's a journey. You have to be prepared to take it up yourself. Even if no one else cares, you need to be the one to push things ahead.
So moving on, like you said, those 4 years were not wasted. You did Kerala Cafe and you met Anwar Rashid, who was also making one of the films in the anthology. And that's where the relationship began. And it's such an important collaboration in your life. Tell me about how the two of you connected and how did it lead to you writing Ustad Hotel?
Well, I only heard of his name. I knew he made these big blockbuster films. And at that point, most filmmakers of that generation were sort of much older than me, and they were not people I could be on a first name basis with, not at all. And when Kerala Cafe was made, I was very surprised by the vibe because the industry in Kerala that way is very it's almost very much on a very personal basis. I think it's because it's so much of an indie film space that on the day that the producer, Mr. Ranjit, he invited all of us into his home to come and pitch stories and discuss things. So I wasn't really ready for a pitch. I just turned up thinking we'll be briefed, and he said, okay, what's your story? What's your story? And everybody was sort of coming up, and so I just sort of made something up and said it. And there was this guy Anwar there, and I think we were among sort of the younger in the lot, and so we just sort of got introduced and we kept in touch during the making of the films and everything. And finally, when the film came out, my favorite shot in that lot is Anwar's shot. It was a beautiful short film called Bridge, and I think it really showcases his talent as a filmmaker. And I was really taken up. I was very impressed and liked it a lot, and told him so. And since then, we kind of kept in touch. What are you doing? You know, what are you writing? That kind of thing was happening. And at one point, when he called up and said, you know, what you have to give us some of some stories. And I mentioned this one story to him about his grandfather and grandson on the seaside, and he was suddenly just, you know, I think he just went alert and said, "Can you write it a little bit? Maybe like, you know, just a small sketch of it." And I said, "Yeah, I can." And he said, "Then maybe can I come over?" I was in Kerala those days, and I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So he came over in about a week's time, and I had put down some you know, notes, and he read it and he gave me a little advance, and that's it. You know, we were working on the film. It was as simple as that. And what I did not realize is that Anwar had till then directed, I think, about 3 films, and each of them were huge blockbusters. So he was
Blockbusters, they were huge.
yes, they were all, you know, he ran 150 days in the theaters, and he was working with all the top stars and all of that. And he had stopped doing it for about 4 years. And then Kerala Cafe happened. Now, I did not know that he had wanted to move on to a different kind of narrative. And he was waiting for something like that to turn up. So I had a great time sitting at home, because while I was in Kerala that time, I was actually pregnant and at my mom's home. And I had been advised to rest completely. So Calicut is this lovely place where people are so warm and hospitable, and especially for a pregnant woman, then, you know, you're just surrounded by food. I think all of that came into the script. That's what happened. So yeah. And I had my baby about a month earlier than expected. So I finished the first 2 acts and not done the third act. I just, you know, went and had my baby. And I remember telling my husband, you know, I may be the one having the baby, but I'm sure Anwar's having the labor. He's wondering, you know, what the hell will happen to my script. So then I wrote the third act after the baby. So, you know, my son was born, and I went back to work on the 7th day. And yeah, just that's how it got done. By the time I think my baby was, yes, exactly 3 months old, 90 days. You're supposed to, you know, follow the traditional thing and everything. And the 91st day, I flew to Chennai with him and my husband, and we pitched our tents there to finish the post-production on Monday, while Anwar was finishing the post-production on the Star Hotel. So it was happening parallel. We released within a month of each other. And it was just, yeah, it was a great time. That was 2012.
So when you started working on Bangalore Days, what are the things in your process that you altered?
When we decide the content of our films, I think we also need to take into consideration where we are at. Because, you know, we are also evolving as people, and what our need is from this thing that we're doing, we're making. For me, that whole little episode with Kerala Cafe was very important. It was the first time I got to, you know, sit in front of an audience that is applauding dialogue which is written. You know, that is applauding the characters as they're going through the journey. And that, for me, somehow it struck a chord. I really engaged with that thing, and it felt, you know, it felt great. I have to say that it was something that gave me a high, and I realized that I'm liking this. I'd like to work a little more in this space to be able to engage with them enough. I had a wonderful actor in Kerala Cafe, Jagadish Srikumar sir, who worked with me, and we were at this film festival, the Abu Dhabi Film Festival, and he sat right next to me. In all his years of experience, it was his first film festival. And while the film was going on, people started clapping at the end of our segment, and he turned around and told me, I won a few awards by then, and he said, "You know what? The real award is not what you go on stage and collect. The real award is this applause that you get." And that just really stayed with me. Unfortunately, soon after that, he had a very nasty accident, and he's not able to speak anymore. And he's in a wheelchair, and it stays with me. Those words that he said, and I really wanted that again. So when I wrote Ustad Hotel as well, the way we crafted it, and Anwar's strengths are in that area. He was able to, when I write something, he was able to tell me that, this would be good in this direction. Do you want to work at that? So that kind of exchange between us was helpful. Somewhere along the line, while I was writing Ustad Hotel, I had not seen any of his other work, and I'd only seen the short film, which I loved. I happened to see something on television which Anwar had done before, and it was this full-on masaledar. Got a little worried, but oh my god, is this what he's expecting out of me? So I just went and called him up and I said, Anwar, I just sort of turned on the television and I saw this movie. I think you made it. It's sort of the kind of writing that you want me to do. And there was silence on the other end of the phone. And he suddenly says, have you no other work? Don't you have a script to write? Please go write that script. Why are you watching this television?
Why are you watching TV? Calling me on
I don't want you to be watching any of those films. I just want you to focus on the script that you're writing, and that is it. Don't think about anything else. Okay, then I was in a better space there. So I had the freedom to do, what I was trying to do, and he gave wonderful feedback, which really helped the film. There's a certain way the film starts, Ustad Hotel, There's a slight sarcastic humor, wit space there, and I was a little worried. Is this going to work? Are we sure? Do we want to carry that kind of humor through? And till then, I'd been writing in English, and he was reading it in English. And then I wrote it in Malayalam. Then I used the accent, which is in Calicut, which is a very how do we say? It's a very fluid form of language, a very warm style of speaking, very casual style of speaking. And once he saw that, he was sorted. He was like, this is it. We're doing this. And we were good to go that way. So that kind of freedom to try those things was very empowering for me. And it's a great ride when you're getting to do this and somebody else is directing it, because you're safe in a way, because his hands, I trust him. So the material is going to be dealt with carefully. And I think that really empowered me to move on to Bangalore days. And after this sort of thing with Banjari Crew, and nobody had seen it. By then, I was in a space I wanted the audience to watch my film, and nobody had really seen Banjari Crew. It ran for, 25 days or something. People wrote about it online, but it was not the kind of, reception that I really wanted. And that, I really was thirsty for material which I could engage with the audience. And it was really funny. People would come to me during that entire time. The whole industry, there was so much of a welcoming thing after Ustad Hotel, and everybody wanted me to write scripts for them. So then I would ask them, so who's going to direct this? And some of them were, very well-known directors and all that. But some of them would be people who are completely new directors. So then I would say, but why them? Then, I can direct it, right? So they said, no. Yeah, so, they'll say, no, you write it, that will be great. Because, we don't want a Manjari Guru, we're looking for an Ustad Hotel. So it was just so clear. They wanted my writing. They did not want my direction. So that's a challenge thrown in your face. So what is it, that I cannot deal with that kind of material myself? Is that what it is? Then, I love a challenge anytime. It's almost a dare. Then that makes that kind of thing which really energizes me. Then great, let's try that. That's the thing that comes in. So when even the Bangalore days idea, I was thinking for a friend. I just had my baby and everything. So it's not a sensible time to go direct a film. So I was just again bouncing it with Anwar, and he just turned around and looked at me and he said, "You're giving this to somebody else?" I said, yeah, I was thinking of, doing this. And he said, no. He said, you should direct this. Not even practical to do it. He said, no, you direct it, I produce it. Let's make this film. That's it. So, it just doesn't sound, I was a mother. I was feeding my baby, for heaven's sake. It's not even a time when you think about these things. You can't hold a single thought in your head for more than, 40 seconds. So I said, I'm not really sure. And he said, no, but you can't give this to somebody else. you have to direct it, Anjali. This is your humor. This is your thing. And I thought about it, and finally I said, well, I'm getting an opportunity. And this is somebody who knows my work, who has faith in me. He knows how I respond to stuff. I remember times when I would be, with my baby at a dinner with family friends, and Andrew would call up and say, Anjali, I'm shooting the scene, but things have changed. This has happened. So can you rewrite the scene? And I'm with my baby at this dinner, so I go to the hostess and I say, can I have a room somewhere? And she'd be like, oh, you want to feed the baby? Yes, yes, come. And I'm like, no, actually, I need to write a scene. So she would escort me in, and I would be writing it and sending it back to him. And that kind of, we had that kind of rhythm between us. So it just seemed to be very sensible to do this. And so fine. So took the risk, jumped at it, and he was just very clear about one thing. He said, this is, the subject is something he loved. And he said, I'm really keen to make commercial films. That's what I'm looking at. And that was the only way that I saw this film too. So it, I think, was a good time. It was a good time once again to come together.
When you came away from both experiences of Happy Journey as well as Manjari Kuru, you questioned something about your process, had a conversation with a person that you'd studied with who's also a director, and something shifted in your process. Would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Sure. In fact, it didn't happen after the two films. It happened during the making with Manjari Kuru, actually. It's, your first film is the one you prepare the most for, I think. And like you said, I had adopted this complete film school approach where you prepare and you prepare and you prepare. And the first 2 weeks we were shooting with children. So, with children, the beautiful thing is that you set a frame for them and you allow them to move in it. And they are very obedient that way. They do not cross those boundaries. And it's very much in the space that you have envisaged. Now, I shot for 2 weeks and I saw my footage, and it was looking exactly like my storyboard, and I was bored to tears because I thought something else would happen and nothing is happening. So it's like, what am I doing? Something isn't working here. So I called up a friend, Sakit Chaudhary. Sakit was my classmate. Sakit had just made his film Pyar Ke Side Effects.
Pyar Ke Side Effects.
He had done a film before me, so I didn't know, anyone in that space other than him. So I called him up and I said, listen, something's going wrong here and I don't know what it is. So he said, what's the problem? And I said, this, my storyboard is looking like my frame. So he's like, so what's your problem? So I said, no, I don't know, there's something is not there in it. The energy, I don't know why it's not happening. And he said, are you controlling things too much? Or are you leaving space for what was happening within the frame to surprise you? And I was really sort of, surprised by that question. And I realized maybe that was the problem. Maybe I had planned everything to such an extent that I'm not allowing anything to surprise me. And any variable, I was maybe pushing it out and not utilizing it within the frame. So the minute we had that conversation, I said, I should start making room for this. I should just, move things around. And there, that process started, where I started pulling stuff out which I had planned, just to surprise the actors who've rehearsed these scenes and learned their lines. You take away one element and they're suddenly, all over the place a bit. And then they start responding to whatever's energy is created there. And I felt that gave us a lot more free-flowing energy in the frame. And the rest of the film, I think, went, into that kind of a process. So I felt much happier with that because I thought it was taking things one step further from what you had planned for. And that, I thought, was very rewarding for everybody concerned. It also gives room to your technicians and people to collaborate more. And, again, and for that film, my DP was Pietro Zerpa. Pietro is he's from Switzerland and he's trained at the AFI. So he was also very used to the whole storyboarded, very clean, clear process. So he worked very well with that. In prep, we worked very closely together. But this slight sort of moving things around was really helping everyone. And that was a big learning for me. By the time we got to Bangalore days, What happened is that in my head there was a certain kind of film, and I don't think the production really realized that they bought into a vision which was a little beyond the budget and all of it. So we had to literally pull words from all over the place, and when we were doing it, they I think a lot of them thought I was completely cuckoo because what is this? Racing and that and this, and too many things in one film. And they kept saying, but this is not how it's done. And I kept saying, it's okay, it's okay. And we just kept going with it. And there again, I learned that from my technicians, I realized this very systematic way was not always working for everybody. They wanted to collaborate, but this was kind of standing in the way. So I used to have a little black book that I would carry with me all the time, with stuff drawn in it and everything. After a point, I realized this wasn't working. So I chucked my black book. I would leave it at home. I'd sit up at home, doing my stuff, but not drag it to set. So I knew what I had, in my mind, but it gave everybody else room to do what sort of they wanted also. And I think that enriched the film. And very often, we wanted to do things which we didn't have permissions for, which we didn't have access to. So we were really on the ball. And there was some way that, I had to sort of make this film, then have the narrative. So it was about responding to whatever was going on around, which keeps you alert in a very different way. And I think that's fabulous to have that, to be able to look around and find opportunity in things to tell the story. Dulquer and Niven and Nazria, they were really getting along. They really had that kind of vibe between them, and they were, on the roads, driving the car, doing those mad things in the car. So we were in another vehicle with walkie-talkies, one walkie-talkie in their car, another walkie-talkie in ours, and the most primitive way, shooting this sort of sitting in an Omni van. We didn't really have the way, we couldn't put a grip gear on those antique cars, and there was no way to shoot it in any of the other systems. So this is what we did. On the way, we see these people, who were standing there with boards of free hugs. So I'm just telling them on the walkie-talkie, hey, stop the car, hug them, do what you want. And boom, and we all did, and we just got it on camera. So it was a lot of on-the-go stuff, and I think when all of that was matched with other stuff which was controlled, the film's energy rose. And I'm more and more tempted to attempt that kind of filmmaking, actually.
You've been working with seasoned actors. You've been working with really good actors. How did you develop your process as you went along, as far as actors are concerned?
With actors, I have been very blessed. Actually, I've had wonderful actors to work with. Like from Anjali Guru, the kind of trust that I've got from legendary actors like Tiligan sir, Murli sir, Urvashi, they're all people whose movies we have grown up. Yes. And I have tremendous respect for their craft. It's something that it's a blessing to be, to have had the chance to work with all of them. And in that film, one thing I realized is that actors anywhere, for that matter, I think they really respect directors who respect their process. When you're modeling a bit of clay, you don't really know that this is what you're going to make. You're in a way responding to everything that's happening, and you end up making something, right? And in that way, I would just like to nudge them towards moments of honesty, which we catch on camera. Acting is not an easy thing. People just assume, yeah, it's the easiest thing to do. No, it isn't. And it calls for a certain, you're exposing your innermost self. And for them to be able to get that confidence, we need to, create that environment. So the workshop is about getting them into that space. That's all. There are often scenes which I write, but I'd never put into the draft. So just for me to understand how these characters might have interacted. Just to give you an example, when we had Bangalore days and we needed to get the chemistry of the cousins. So for the workshops, what we did is we acted out scenes of the three of them interacting. I think Niven and Dulquer had never met. It was the first time that they met at our workshop, and they were both a little, they were wondering how is it going to be. But from the first minute, they just sort of, it just really was smooth sailing. It went really well.
Your casting process is also very unique, which is that you never cast anyone until you meet them. And have a conversation with them or a series of conversations with them. And then once the decision has been made that this person is going to play this character, you actually go back and rewrite some of the material, taking little things from what the actor actually likes. For example, in Fahad's case, you found out that he's a dog lover. And
I have to say, in Fahad's case, it didn't happen like that. I had this sort of semblance of a scene in my mind, and I called him up one day and I said, "Listen, are you comfortable around dogs? Is that something that you..." And he just says, "You don't know this about me?" What? He says, "I take my dog to set." You know, that was news to me. I had no idea. So he turned out to be this complete dog lover. I said, "Hey, then now nothing's stopping us." And so I went about writing all of that. For Fahad, it was just a lucky coincidence that happened.
Got it.
Yes, it empowered me to write even more because I knew he would be comfortable doing all of that. That definitely worked. But yes, usually with the actors, it's not anything else. It's not about what they like, but it's about giving them some identifiers,
Yes.
some little pegs that they can hold on to when they are becoming that character.
This is you a month before Bangalore Days was supposed to go on floors, right? You kept on thinking that there is for everyone else this was going really well. Anwar was really happy. He thought everything is done. People have cracked it. But there was something that kept bothering you about the story, about the script, and you kept on thinking that you need to fix something, right? And then you started fixing it a month before shoot, and the final draft, post all the rewrites that you did, was ready only a week before shooting. First of all, what do you need to have on board to kind of take a decision like this? And what enables a decision like that? Secondly, when you change things and it's only a week from shoot, what kind of prep do you need to do in order for you to put that into place and also make the deadline?
We went into prep, locations are locked and everything is done, and I'm still twiddling my thumbs, feeling very, very, very nervous. One thing that I think as a director, what I bring on board is my instinct. A lot of my work is around instinct. And when the instinct is raising a red flag somewhere, then I have to listen to it, because all the rest of the work that follows is also going to be based on instinct. So if there's something troubling you there, then it's very difficult to build on that. And when I sort of handed the script out, people had gone into prep and everything, and I think this was about 3 weeks before shoot, when I turned to my producer and my TP and I said, "Guys, this is somehow not working for me, but I will not change the actors, I will not change the locations, I will work within all the production plans which have been made, but let me change the script. Let me just do that." And fortunately, him and my TP, they came on board and they said, "It's okay. You do the thing. As long as these big things are not changing." They had the faith in me. And then the actors, I remember telling Nivin the new second half, and Nivin was very carefully listening to me. And then he realized that it had changed completely, and he looked up at me and he said, so it's just changed completely." Well, yeah, it's changed. And he said, "I love it. I really like what it's become." So thank God everybody responded like that. So it was great. Yes, that kind of faith is what it takes. But I think this listening to your instinct is very important. And there have been times that I haven't, and I've suffered for that.
I just wanted to find out from you, what did you change in the film?
There were a fair amount of things, actually. It was not just Sarah and Aju. Sarah and Aju was a big part of it. I actually written this whole track of Sarah in a wheelchair in an earlier draft, and we put it aside. It wasn't working for some reason. And she was not in a wheelchair in the draft that we were working on. So
Wow.
I changed that whole thing and brought this back. Another very significant part that changed was about Kuttan and his father.
Oh my God.
The whole Goa aspect and all of that. And So, even in the Das Divya story, there was a fair amount not that theirs didn't change too much, but by the time all this sort of got tweaked together, there was another fairly important character, and there was a story around Aju's life where we were just not able to find the right location. There needed to be a space, and not able to find that location. So I had to quickly take whatever that character was doing and distribute it among the cousins. But that actually worked for the better because it brought the cousins closer together, and their characters were enriched. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of luck also involved.
You managed to work with people who are now superstars. They have a journey that is that is just beautiful. They've thrived, grown, done material which everyone can be proud of. If you can tell us about Parvati, Nivin, Fahad, Dulkar, and also Prithvi, because the reason I ask about Prithvi is that Prithvi does such different material, and Kure was just such a surprise. It was so wonderful to see him, play Joshua so beautifully, and such a revelation. So just shedding light on the process of a few of them would be really interesting to know.
With Prithvi, it's where I think his process also changes fairly depending on the level of trust that is there. And I think he was very trusting in terms of what I wanted to shape the character into, and he would really go with that. He would allow me into certain areas, and not once would he come to the monitor and take a look even. So unless I said, can you come and take a look? So it's that level of trust, and I really appreciate that. With Parvati, she's this Nazi prepper. She will go all out. So she invests so much in the prepping for her character that even I trust her with even the smallest scene. I have to just I think it was one of the reviews which said she can turn even a one note into a sonata.
Yes.
I think that's a very good way of describing her, because even with a very little thing, she gives it a lot of depth. It's because of that work she puts into it. So I think with Parvati, that was a very specific process. For Bangalore Days, she actually asked for a wheelchair way before the shoot, and the production was wondering why she even asking for a wheelchair. She insisted a wheelchair be delivered home, and she went around a whole day or 2 days or something in the wheelchair just to know what it would be like to be in a home in a wheelchair and access everything by wheelchair. So she goes into that kind of very, very dedicated work. For Fahad, I think it was a lot of discussion of the backstory works a lot, I think, for Fahad, and he will not respond much. He will just listen. He's a great listener. And finally, at the shoot, in the frame, during his performance, you realize he was listening. He's like that. He's like a sponge. He just absorbs. Nivin is someone who works with a minute-to-minute briefing. It's crazy. His energy is this bubbly energy, and he has this. I don't like to call it a problem, but right in the middle of take or just before the take, he will find something which amuses him, and he will burst into giggles. And maybe a serious scene, it may be anything, and I've had like my DP walk out of set saying, "Let him laugh." The only thing was that the person giggling after Nivin would be me. So, okay. But Nivin is like that. He's full of that bubbly energy, and so I remember there was one scene we had to do, and I would stop every time. It was that scene where they're playing cards on the bed the night before the wedding, and I would stop, would cut and go to him and say, "Nivin, maybe like this." And then he tells me, you can talk to me during the take. It's okay. And like, okay, talk to you during the take.
What does that mean?
So then, Yes, and you have a camera moving in a circular track, the other actors are performing, all of this happening at the same time. So I am literally talking to him through the take, and he's just doing it on the wall. He's just going on. So it's so different from everybody else's process. But again, he really gets into that. And then he loves it. He loves it when you give him these little things to say and to think. And that last minute adjustments, he loves that. He likes responding to that. Dulquer is very different in terms of Dulquer is full of doubts. What is this right? Am I doing this? Okay, am I not doing that? But why am I doing this? There's so many doubts throughout, and you just literally gather him and calm him and say, "It's fine. You're doing it.
Don't worry.
You know, it's okay." And then he's like, "Are you sure?" Even after all of that. and during the take, he will just give it his own. He's not conscious or mindful about where the camera is or nothing. He will just give it his all, and then it's up to you to do what you want with it. That's his nature. So each of them is completely different from the other, and that is I remember during Bangalore days, he had this briefing of that he's a slightly rough guy and he's not like the others, and he kept coming back and saying, "But I'm laughing all the time. Isn't that weird? Why am I laughing so much if I'm this kind of rough kind of guy?" And I kept telling him, "But you're with your cousins. You're not like that with them." And then finally, when he saw it, he got it that it was working in a certain way. It's that's his process. That's his thing. And I think he also responds a lot to the spontaneous energy. If you prep him to death, it's really not great. And he can really get into character. The guy who everybody thought was shy. Dulquer is known for being a very gentleman kind of person. On the sets of Bangalore days, he was pulling pranks on everyone. He would steal the AD's walkie-talkie and issue instructions as if he was an AD, and everybody's going off in different directions. Who is giving this instruction on the walkie? And he was really playing the fool. He just became Arjun. So that's I think they all just really just get into that, and that's lovely.
I feel that Kude had a lot of silence and had the same empathy and the same tender moments that are there in your film. The same authenticity, but somehow I felt that some of the warm filters were out. Is that a function of the story that you were telling, or is it a certain evolution, a certain kind of direction your own journey as a filmmaker is going in?
I think I want to make films which don't have a Minnie Mouse bow at the end of it. I think I need to move on from there. And if you ask me, in Kude, to me, possibly one of my favorite bits of that film is the opening, where you see Joshua in his workplace in the Middle East. And I remember shooting with these real workers in the oil rigs, and, in those spaces. We did not work with extras. Instead, what we said is, at that time, at 5 o'clock, a lot of them were really going away, from work. So we'll just travel in that bus with them. So we jumped in with a camera, and I remember one AD saying to them, "Okay, everybody get ready. Everybody imagine that you've, worked for the whole day and you're all going home." And we all turned around to him and said, "They have worked the whole day and they are going home." Okay, this is who they are. And we have the camera moving, from face to face to face. And those are real faces. And they have stories to tell. And somewhere in there, I think, lies the kind of film I want to make.
They're wonderful, wonderful people who've joined us, who are on the session with us, and I really, really need to give them the opportunity to talk to you. Can we unmute Andrea, Tanvi, Sunil, please?
As a creator, how do you personally define what commercial cinema is, and how would you like to see it change in the future?
When it's an artistic film, you're actually making it for one's own artistic voice. Whereas with commercial cinema, I think the intent is to communicate, to connect, to connect with an audience. So in a commercial film, for me, the process is different because you are actually focusing that film towards a certain audience. And so your constant exploration is, how am I connecting with that audience? People give very little credit to commercial cinema, frankly, because I think it has great power to influence. It has great capacity to reach out and communicate. So the kind of stories one can put across, the kind of characters one can put across, the kind of values one can put across, there's a whole lot of things that, when delivered in a commercial cinema, even if you you smuggle it in certain ways, you can reach a much wider audience, and that potential deserves to be exploited.
I wanted to understand, how do you incorporate a space or a segue for improvisation in any aspect of filmmaking? When we say improvisation, we primarily kind of connected to dialogues per se and the character behaving. But in your opinion, do you think that there are other aspects of filmmaking that fall under the purview of improvisation while in the shooting stage?
I believe improvisation is key, not just in what happens between action and cut, but also in terms of every department that functions. But you give a certain brief to a department that this is what I'm anticipating, this is what I would like. But once you've empowered them with that understanding, they need to have the capacity to come back and surprise you with things which are not on paper. So that is an improvisation from their end. Now, to me as a filmmaker, it's up to me to utilize that. I will not say that you should leave room for improvisation in the script, because you should write the script to the best of your ability. I try to. But I don't think we should see the script as the holy grail that cannot be messed around with. Just clay. The script will only take you to the springboard. You have to jump off that springboard to make the film. If your film is going to look exactly like your script, then what have you contributed as a director?
My question is with respect to your debut feature film, Manjari Kuru. How was the experience of working with young actors as protagonists as compared to the more experienced actors like Tilagan sir, Rahman sir, Kavyo ma'am and Urvashi ma'am? How did you approach directing these young actors?
I really enjoy it, actually, because they're far more, how do we say, they have less masks on, and that shows up on screen. You don't need to help them unlearn. That really is helpful. But just to give you an example, it's where, while we were doing this, we would say, okay, let's try this, let's try that, play a lot of games, play the fool, get the energy up and all of that. And then after the first few weeks, the actors came in. And when the actors came in, and then they would perform, and then each of them had their own style. So slowly we had to kind of break it a little bit and move it all into one particular space. And I'd have these kids, they'd come and sit around me, and then they'd look into the monitor and say, "She isn't doing too well, is she? Maybe you should do something about that." It was amazing to see how they were responding to one another. That also taught me a lot, because with actors who are constantly in the industry and constantly doing work, to get them out of their rhythm is a challenge. So we had a wonderful thing with Sync Sound. In 2007, we shot with Sync Sound in Manjari Kuru, and all of the actors were thrown, because most of them had not worked Sync Sound. So they had to really learn their lines and know it, and there was no prompting and all of that. So everybody was a little edgy. So there was, Rahman and Rushi, everybody sitting and learning their lines like students. And whereas the kids knew all their lines, they didn't even have to refer to the paper or anything. So it was a very fresh contrast, and we had, a lovely combination of that, which I think benefited the film a lot.
When you complete your draft when you start rewriting those drafts, how do you cope up with the judgment factor? Like, you lose a judgment after a time, right? So yeah. How do you cope up with that?
Oh, you definitely lose judgment after a certain point. And that's when, I would like to show my script to somebody else who has not heard of the story. Sometimes taking time away also helps.
I want to know your writing process regarding characters. Do you come up with years worth of backstories for each character, or do you just jump very quickly into the situation and do the surface action that happened within the story and later figure out the origins of the character? And I'm very curious about the origin point for Sarah.
The characters and the story, like I said, are very intertwined. The character is the vehicle through which you're telling the story. So the stages of development for a character for me, I may not, write the full backstory and then start. That doesn't work. I will have a semblance of who the character is. I never make a character note before writing some scenes. I will put the scenes together, and I have a tendency to write a few scenes, just a few, and then the character starts to develop from that. Then you start fleshing it out a bit more. Actually, the stage at which I make character notes is when I have to communicate about this character to a third person, which is, for me, the character is a person in themselves. So, like I said, the actor will start talking about the character. After a point, these characters start telling you about themselves. They will start telling you, no, I will not do that, and I will do this. You may come in the morning and sit in front of your laptop and say, okay, today I'm going to write this scene, but suddenly you have a character standing there saying, no, I'm not going to do that. So, you have to listen to them, I think.
Thank you so much, Anjali, for giving us so much time. And thank you everyone else for plugging in and staying the course. But listen, I know something really amazing is in the works, and I hope we get to see that soon.
Thank you very much.
To watch the conversations on Dial M for Films, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jio MAMI Mumbai Film Festival.